Hello, welcome or welcome back. My name is Addie, and the opening round of the 2020 Goodreads Choice Awards, which is the 12th annual Goodreads Choice Awards, just went live. It's like 2:30 in the morning, but I'm awake, so let's record this. I am going to be looking at the nominations off of my phone, but my phone does not screen record. It's an old ass phone, so I will be putting the scrolling bar thing from my computer over here. The nominations change the order they're in every time, so you may not see the same order on the screen here as I'm talking about it. But the reason I'm recording this video is because I plan to read the top 10, hopefully, nominations for fantasy before the winner comes out. So we'll see if I can do it. It may be top 15, but ideally top 10. How it works is the opening round you get 15 books that you could vote on. Then the semifinal round ups to 20, adding an additional 5 books that are nominated from the community. And then you get the final round where you vote between the 20 books. Key here is that the 5 extra nominated books never make the top 10. So there's no real risk of having to read those books if I haven't read them already. There's no real risk of those hitting the top 10. So the goal is by December 8th, I have read the 10 books and I can make guesses which order that they go in. And yeah, so this is kind of a November TBR plus the first round of nominations for the fantasy category, plus what have I already read, what do I still need to read, kind of all of those things in one. The other thing is a lot of these books, because they're fantasy, will be later in the series, and if it's something where it's deep enough in the series that there's no way I can read it this month, I will read the first book in the series or the book that I have not read, or the furthest that I have gotten in the series, I guess. So the first nomination is called The Empress of Salt and Fortune, which is book 1 in the Stinging Hills cycle by Nivo. I can't say her name very well. I apologize. And this is not something that I have read. This is I've seen the cover, but I don't really know what this is about. Next is The House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J. Maas, which I have read. Yay! One book down that I actually really enjoyed that book, so I don't have to read that. Next is The Burning God, which is book 3 in the Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. I was kind of afraid that I would have to read this, but because I don't want to read it. But I will be reading book 1 in the Poppy War, which I think is called the Poppy War. I don't know, but I will definitely be reading that. Next, I'm a little shocked to see this on here. Next up is Rhythm of War, which is book 4 of the Stormlight Archive. This doesn't even come out until the end of November. So how the fuck are we supposed to vote on this book if it doesn't even release until the end of November? Yeah, that's a weird thing. I plan to read that anyway, so I guess it's good to not have to add an additional book to my TBR because I was already going to read this. That's weird. Next is The City We Became by N.K. Jemisin. I have read this already. Thank God. This one was okay. I didn't particularly like it, but I have read it. Next up is Peace Talks, which is book 16 in the Dresden Files, which I have not read, but I will read book 1 in the Dresden Files for this. Next one is another one that I have not read. It is The Empire of Gold by S.A. Chakraborty. This is number 3 in the Daevabad trilogy. I kind of wanted to already read the Daevabad trilogy, which is something of brass, something of bronze. I don't remember the name of it. It'll be on the screen here. I will be reading that. I kind of wanted to read it already, like I just said, so sure. That is an Arabian, I believe, or Middle Eastern at least, fantasy that sounds really good. I just haven't gotten around to reading the first book in the series yet. Next up is Black Sun, which is Between Earth and Sky, book 1 by Rebecca Roanhorse. I have read this book. Yay! It was weird as shit, but I have read it. Next up is Piranesi. I don't know if I said that right, by Susanna Clark. I have not read that, but I believe it is a Greek retelling. I don't know much about it. I don't know Greek myths too well, but I have heard some other booktubers talk about it, so down to read it. Next was The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. I have read this. It was a just gooey, sweet, wonderful little fantasy story that just, it's so sticky sweet you want to throw up. So it was good. Next one was The Bone Shard's Daughter, which is the Drowning Empire book 1, which I have not read. So I guess I'll get to that one. I literally know absolutely nothing about this book. Next up was Witches and Future Witches by Alex E. Harrow. I'm kind of sad this is nominated because I did not like the author at all. I have read 10,000 Doors of January by Alex Harrow and I did not like it, so I really don't want to read another book by her, but I guess I should be nice and give her another shot. So I will read this. I think it's pretty short. Next up is The Deadly Education by Naomi Novik. I don't know much about this book, or I do know about this book, and it sounded interesting and I kind of plan on reading it already, but I also heard that it is very racist, so I'm a little bit worried about how Asian characters are treated in this book. Next up is The Invisible Life of Addie Larue, which is another book that just released. I think I own a copy of it. If not, I will get it. Next up is The Girl and the Stars, book 1 of The Ice by Mark Lawrence. I've read Red Sister by Mark Lawrence, which is the trilogy before this, but I haven't read the rest of that trilogy, so I don't know if I need to read the first trilogy first before getting to this, so I may end up reading Grey Sister? Is that the next book in the series? I may end up reading that instead of this one, which is just another book by Mark Lawrence. So I'm not sure. Unfortunately, it looks like I have not read a whole lot of books on here, and I am going to be adding a whole lot of books to my already long TBR for the month. Let me know if you've read any of these books that I haven't, if you think any of these books are ones that I highly, highly, highly need to prioritize. Honestly, right now, if I were to vote based off of what I have read and what I enjoy, I would probably vote The House of Earth and Blood, which is Crescent City book 1. If I'm going to guess what's going to be my personal winner, it would be Rhythms of War, because I love Brandon Sanderson. He is by far my favorite author. That series is just everything. I literally took off 2 days of work to read that book on release date. I am so excited about it. So that's what I think is going to win. If I were voting on what I've already read, it would be Crescent City. So I guess I will rate what I've read as I read it. Number one right now for me would be Crescent City, or what is that? The House of Earth and Blood, which is book 1 in Crescent City by Sarah J. Maas. Then probably The House of the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune, followed by Black Sun by Rebecca Roanhorse, and then The City We Became by N.K. Jemisin. I really, 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 really liked The House of Earth and Blood. I thought that was just a really fun story, and I just really didn't care for The City We Became, so those were pretty easy to rate. I liked but didn't love both The House in the Cerulean Sea and Black Sun, so those are kind of, they could be switched. They're kind of like meh, like, oh yeah, those were good, but not like, oh my god, I love this. So that's what we've got so far. I will put the list over here somewhere. I'm sure it's already been up while I've been talking. Thanks editing me. And then we can just add to the books as I read them. Hello, it is November 2nd, and I am still 20% into Stormfront, haven't made a whole lot of progress on that. I did start The Invisible Life of Addie Larue by V.E. Schwab. I'm just about halfway done. Not quite halfway, but almost there. I'm enjoying this so far. I like the story. I like the writing style. I'm interested. It's all good so far. I don't have a whole lot to say about it that every other YouTuber in the universe hasn't said about it. It's basically a girl in the 1700s hates her life of being property because she's owned by her father and then sold to her husband and then owned by her husband and used as a baby making factory. And she doesn't want to live that life. She wants to be free. She wants to travel. She doesn't want to belong to anybody. And in a moment of panic, she makes a deal with the devil to get that in exchange for her soul. And as deals with the devil goes, that doesn't exactly turn out how she thinks it's going to turn out. And she gets cursed. So no one can remember her. Like, once they leave the room, they forget of her existence, and no one can know her name. And then in 2014, she meets a guy who remembers her. So she's also immortal as part of the deal. I think that kind of came across in the fact that it starts in the 1800s and lasts until 2014. Basically, the devil gets her soul once she's done with her life, but she has to say that she's done with no one ever being able to remember her, and then give up her soul to the devil. So it's a mix of her meeting this young man in 2014 who finally remembers her, and her history dealing with the devil over a couple of centuries. Very interesting. I'm liking it a lot so far. I will check back in with you when I've got more progress into this book. Hello, it is Tuesday, November 3rd, and I have finished The Invisible Life of Addie Larue by V.E. Schwab, which was actually a really good book. Like, surprisingly good, even though everybody has basically been talking about how good it is, so I shouldn't be surprised by how good it is, right? Does that make any sense at all? Anyway, I like it. The ending is a mix of good and bad, because you all know how much I like my really sad, depressing endings. And this one's kind of sad and depressing, but also not sad and depressing at the same time. which gives away nothing and gives you absolutely no information at all. So that brings us to our ranking, and I think I still like House of Earth and Blood best. I think that's still in my number one spot so far. I really did like The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, and I may end up changing my mind that I like this one more than House of Earth and Blood, but I'm going to need some time to set on it, and I'm going to continue to put House of Earth and Blood at the top for right now, followed by The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, then House in the Cerulean Sea, then Black Sun, and then The City We Became, which that is 5 out of the 20 books that I need to read, and it's the 3rd of the month, so that's not awful, and it would be a lot better if I didn't have 10 other books that aren't related to this challenge at all to read this month. So basically I've got 25 books that I need to read this month. It's fine. It's totally fine. Yikes. Anyway, moving on from that, I have started The City of Brass, which is the first book in the Daevabad trilogy. I am reading this in place of the nominated book, which is the 3rd book in the Daevabad trilogy, which is Empire of Gold, I think is the name of it. Something of Gold. The cover will be here. I think it's Empire of Gold. Anyway, I'm about 4 chapters into this book, and so far it's very interesting. It takes place in Cairo, Egypt, and it's about a young girl who, well, she might not be so young, but a girl who is basically a street urchin. She lives on the streets. She's a poor girl, and she has the ability to sense and sometimes heal illnesses. And instead of using that for good, she uses it to scam rich people. So far, so good. It turns out that she's not human. I mean, lo and behold, somebody who can sense and heal illness is not human. Who would have thought? And she may be half jinn. So, and there's apparently some sort of war going on throughout the centuries with magical creatures, and she's being protected by another race of a magical creature to get her to the City of Brass because she's the last of her kind, even if she is half human. And that's basically all I've got so far. So not a whole lot. It's interesting so far. I'm enjoying it, but 4 chapters in, it's not a lot of information. Hello. It is Saturday, November 2nd, and I'm about to start a new book. I finished The City of Brass by S.A. Chakraborty. The story itself was pretty interesting. There was a whole lot that I liked, that I enjoyed, but the political system I just couldn't wrap my head around. I didn't understand why certain factions hated each other so passionately. It just didn't make any sense to me. And the fact that there existed a sub-faction of healers, which were literally the only people in existence who could heal their kind, who seemed to like magically curse themselves a lot, and for some reason all of those people were killed to extinction because I don't know why. And that's my problem with it, is I couldn't figure out why they would sacrifice their own lives and comfort to kill all of these healers and not like enslave a couple of them. That sounds bad, but it didn't make any sense to me at all. So I struggled with that a lot. In just not being able to figure out why one faction hates half humans while another faction hates the faction that hates half humans because of their religion and something to do with the healers. It didn't make any sense to me at all. Like, no sense at all. I didn't understand it. I was beyond confused. So I struggled with that a lot. And because I'm struggling to figure out what the hell's going on, I didn't really like the book as much as I could have, I guess. Should have. I know a lot of people really like it. I was so confused about the politics that I was like, yeah, the story's okay. What the fuck is going on again? So to add that into my list, I am putting it in 4th place so far. So House of Earth and Blood is still at the top, followed by The Invisible Life of Addie Larue, which are the 2 that I really, really love. Then next is House in the Cerulean Sea, which I really, really liked. Then City of Brass is next, followed by Black Sun, which both of those are ones that I thought were good, but not any sort of fantastic. And then The City We Became is next, which I just didn't care for at all. It's not bad, it's just very, very far outside of my taste. So the next thing I am reading after this is going to be The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. And this one I'm a little skeptical about liking. I've heard a lot of people like it. I've heard that it is very graphic in nature, which is fine. I don't mind books like that. But it is also based off of, like, Asian, like, lore, and then, like, actual events that happened in Asia. And I don't particularly care for Asian mythology. And that's just a personal thing. Like, there's obviously nothing wrong with Asian mythology in general. It's just not something that I particularly find fascinating enough to read about. In most of the books that are based off of Asian mythology and lore, I'm only, like, okay with. I haven't found anything yet that I love. Now, I could be completely wrong, and maybe I've just been reading the wrong books, and this is going to blow me away, and I'm going to love it. That's why I read things like this. It's like, maybe it doesn't appeal to me, but maybe I'm wrong to assume that something doesn't appeal to me because of one little factor of it. So I'm going to start that today, and I will check back in with you tomorrow whether I finish or not, because tomorrow's the end of the week and I gotta wrap up the vlog. Hello, it is Sunday night and I am finished with The Poppy War. I don't know why I couldn't remember the name of that book. That actually turned out to be way better than I expected it to be. The Poppy War is not really hugely based off of Chinese mythos, which, as I said earlier, I don't particularly care for Asian-inspired fantasy. It is based off of actual events, or a lot of it is based off of actual events. It's still fantasy, and there's still just straight-up fantasy, non-realistic elements in it, but it was mostly based off of the author's experience being a World War II researcher. Because this is based off of actual events, there are a few battle scenes or sacking of city scenes that are like word for word, not even necessarily based off of, they're word for word descriptions of the sacking of different cities during Chinese history, like modern Chinese history. So there is a scene that everybody says is a trigger warning, because it is. Like, there are very graphic and gruesome descriptions of death and sexual assault that really, really happened in the Nanjing massacre. And yeah, very, very little from that part of the book is made up. And that's horrifying that this shit really happened to people. There was also another city battle that was based off of the Battle of Shanghai. Now, this book takes place in 2 parts. The first part is kind of like a school, like a young rural girl manages to pass tests that are designed where only wealthy people can pass them because they require years of study, and most rural people don't have the money to study for years or to send their children to study for years. So she passes these tests and gets into the most prestigious military school. First half of the book is her spending time in the military school, dealing with the prejudice of people around her because she's a rural girl and she should have never made it into that military school. And then the second half is battles and war and stuff like that with a mystical undertone because it is a fantasy. So there you have that. Ranking. Let me grab my phone here. For ranking, I am displacing City of Brass and moving The Poppy War to 4th place. So again, I'm gonna stick it over here, turn the camera a little bit so there's room. Number 1 is House of Earth and Blood. Number 2 is The Invisible Life of Addie Larue. Number 3 is House in the Cerulean Sea. Number 4 is now The Poppy War. Then 5 is City of Brass. 6 is Black Sun, and 7 is The City We Became. So 7 down, 13 to go maybe? If I'm only going to 10, then 3 to go. But if I manage to read all 20, then it's 13. So we'll see. We don't even know the bottom 5 yet. Maybe I've read them all and it'll be a lot easier to do this. But for right now, I'm a little panicked, but it's still like really early in the month. It is the 8th. And I've read 7 books, which is good. So I am not going to put any more books into this vlog. This is going to be the end of this vlog. I will be starting A Deadly Education by Naomi Novik next. I have heard problematic things about that book, but I'm going to read it anyway because it's still nominated. I know there are supposedly some racist undertones, and there are a lot of stream of consciousness scenes in it, which not my favorite at all, but hopefully I can get through it. I mean, it with this project, if I hate it, I'll DNF it. Like, I'm not afraid to DNF anything on this list if I just straight up hate it. But there's nothing left on this list other than Brandon Sanderson book, which doesn't come out till the 17th, that I really, really, really desperately want to read. So now I'm kind of getting into the ones that are kind of like, I guess I'll read it, whatever. But yeah, that's going to be next. That's what I'm starting next week. I know this vlog has only like covered 3 books, and I know you're all thinking like, don't you normally read more than 3 books in a week? I did read other books this week. And technically it's been a little bit over a week because it's the 8th and I started on the 1st. So the other books are just not for this challenge. They're for my century read. So I'm going to cover them really quick, but I'm not going to really talk about them. Just kind of covering at the end of the video here. So I did read Oathbringer. This is the 3rd book in the Stormlight Archive. This is a reread, but it's like 1,200 pages. So I did finish this at the very beginning of this month. I started it on the 31st and then finished it on the 2nd, so it took me about 3 days to read. But I did read this. I've also started The Lies of Loch Lamora. I'm about halfway through, if you could see by my corgi butt. Just about halfway through with The Lies of Loch Lamora by Scott Lynch. I did read Uglies by Scott Westerfield. We've got a lot of Scotts today for some reason. And I read Disillusion by Richard Lee Byers. So all of these will be covered at the end of the month in my century wrap-up, except for Oathbringer, which will just, I don't know, it probably won't be covered in a wrap-up at all. It's a reread. Everybody loves Brandon Sanderson. I don't think I have anything special to say about that one. And that's pretty much it for this week. and I will catch you in next week's vlog. Bye.